I slipped into the campus through the side gate and made my way to our old archive room, hoping to find some clues. The sky was overcast, occasionally dropping a few raindrops. I reached the archive room. Although the door was locked, the window wasn't. Many sliding windows in the school were broken, so I easily climbed in. I started going through the files from 2012 while carefully listening to any sounds outside, fearing I might be discovered. However, none of the files mentioned the renovation and removal of the corridor on the 5th floor of the school. Based on what Uncle Lee, Wang Lijie, and the fat guy had said, if it had happened, it must have been before Uncle Lee arrived. But when I found Uncle Lee's file, I was once again struck by confusion. The records indicated that he had stayed on because he refused to be transferred with Ba Zhong, rather than being a newly assigned security guard. He had been here for at least 10 years. Was he at Ba Zhong in 2006? I hadn't even taken the high school entrance exam then. That can't be right. I continued flipping through the files, not wanting to miss any information. Finally, I came across a small note in the preface of the 2012 document stating that the old Ba Zhong had stored some unimportant files in the adjacent building, along with some teaching supplies that hadn't been cleared out. To ensure the item's safety, the key had always been kept in the school's security office. I pinned my last hope on this and quietly made my way to the security office next to the reception room. Corner by the bushes was a perfect hiding spot. Just as I was thinking about how to get Uncle Lee to hand me the key, I overheard two people talking inside. In addition to Uncle Lee, the other person was Uncle Qian, who had been on night duty that day. I perked up and listened closely, picking up that Uncle Qian had been switched to the afternoon shift, while the night shift had been taken over by old Zhang, who used to work afternoons. Also, since the incident with Ameng, the school required daily checks of the adjacent building, once in the morning and once at 6 p.m. Lee had already checked in the morning after handing over to Uncle Zhang, and Uncle Qian was scheduled to go at 6 p.m. With this information, I formulated a plan to follow Uncle Qian into the building that night. "That girl is really creepy," Uncle Qian's voice drifted out. "In our teaching building, the lights in the hallway have been motion-activated for years. If you walk even slightly louder, they turn on. She insists she sneaked up to the 5th floor with someone else. Sounds so real, but I checked the surveillance from that night and saw no one. Even if I'm getting old, the police wouldn't lie, there was no one on camera. Officer Wang was there too. Are we all lying to her? And there wasn't a single light on that night. How could she have floated up? Even if she did, how did she get to the other building? Officer Wang even told me not to argue with her. I'm embarrassed to say, but after all these years on night shift, that was the first time I got scared. Motion-activated lights? Wasn't Ameng referring to manual switches? I had overlooked this detail, even forgetting to check when I sneaked into the teaching building. But even so, how could the surveillance be explained? It's really eerie. I don't know how she got up there, and the thing about the 5th floor. The corridor. Don't talk about it. It's unsettling. Should we check the surveillance again? Old Lee joked. As soon as I heard they were considering checking the surveillance, I got excited. No, let's not. It's unsettling, Uncle Qian replied. Why not? I'll keep you company. I'm too scared to watch alone. After some back and forth, Uncle Qian ultimately decided against it, saying he would head back and come again in the afternoon. Once Uncle Qian left, Uncle Lee poked his head out, glanced around, then returned to the reception room. He quickly operated the surveillance computer, and from the sounds it seemed like he pulled up the video from that night, staring at the screen in silence. I quietly listened from outside, too afraid to peek in. It was eerily quiet inside. Uncle Lee seemed to be watching carefully. About an hour later, perhaps feeling tired from staring, he shifted in his chair, stood up, stretched, and yawned. What the hell? There's nothing. Seeing Uncle Lee walk out of the reception room toward the teaching building, seemingly to perform his patrol, I quickly dashed inside. On the reception desk was a monitor, a keyboard, a mouse, a thermos, and a small fan. I hurriedly sat down, not wanting to waste time, and immediately pulled up the surveillance footage from the night of June 24th, fast-forwarding to 11 p.m. and then watching at 8x speed. I had no idea when Uncle Lee would return, so I had to scan for any anomalies and would slow down if I found anything. That moment, it started to rain outside. The rain grew heavier, quickly drowning out the crackling sounds from the surveillance. 11 o'clock, everything seemed normal. 11:01, everything seemed normal. 11:02, everything seemed normal. 11:23, everything seemed normal. 11:24, everything seemed normal. 11:25, everything seemed normal. Through about 3 minutes, not a single figure appeared. 11:26, 2 figures passed by the camera. I jumped in surprise, slowed down the playback, and dragged the progress bar back. Indeed, there were 2 figures appearing from the lower part of the frame. How is this possible? It can't be. Camera captured the backs of 2 people awkwardly making their way across the playground, approaching the teaching building. Just as Aming had said, this was likely her and her fiancé entering the campus through the side gate. This shouldn't be. There are 2 people. How could they not be seen? The police didn't see them. Outside, the rain poured down. I was sweating. As I continued to drag the progress bar, I saw the 2 of them carefully enter the teaching building, cautiously searching for classrooms in the hallway, and gingerly moving at the stairwell. From the outline, one was Aming and the other someone I felt I'd seen before. This shouldn't be. They're very noticeable. Why can't they be seen? As I pondered the surveillance issue, I became more convinced of what Aming had said. My body froze in the chair, and my hand that was dragging the mouse began to tremble. They went up to the 5th floor. Unfortunately, the blind spots in the surveillance couldn't capture the corridor, but all the other camera angles were particularly distant except for the one on the 5th floor, which was at the end of the corridor and facing the other side. As Aming had said, they reached the end of the corridor and then walked into the building directly across. So this camera perfectly captured their approach from afar. As they walked toward the so-called corridor on the 5th floor, the image became increasingly clear. 2 faces became clearer and clearer. I could see Aming's face. She was in the front. Behind her was a guy. The outline sharpened even more. Camera zoomed in closer. I controlled the mouse, afraid I might miss the moment I clearly saw that person's face. Looking at his clothing and build, an uneasy feeling welled up in me. Just as I was about to see that person's features clearly, a loud crash suddenly startled me, making me almost faint. A large hand slammed my head onto the desk. "What are you doing here?" "Wait, is that you?" Seeing my face, Uncle Lee slowly released his grip. When he glanced at the surveillance screen, he seemed to understand. He didn't scold me but lit a cigarette instead. "Uncle, I saw someone on the surveillance." "There really is someone. Why aren't you helping Aming look for him?" "What nonsense are you talking? Where's the person? Tell me." That moment, the video froze at the last second, completely empty with nothing there. I stood dumbfounded, momentarily speechless. Uncle Lee exhaled a smoke ring, saying, "It's rare to be confused in life, just forget about it." Seeing I was hesitant to speak, he quickly added, "Don't talk too much during the day, it's bad luck." I lowered my head in silence, thinking that Uncle Lee must see me as crazy too. I cautiously began to step away. Check in, I knew that both Aming and I seemed crazy to them. I left the school, feeling frustrated. If I had just watched for one more second, I would have known who her fiancé was. I found the stairs in the middle of the ground floor and went up to take a look. The doors on the 2nd and 3rd floors were locked, that was certain. Next to the 2nd floor was a restroom, which people from the ground floor stores like the supermarket and flower shop used when they needed to go. Around 5:55 p.m., Uncle Qian left the school. I quickly went upstairs first, hiding in the restroom, planning to sneak in at the right moment. In July, the sun was still up at 7 p.m. But with the rain and overcast sky today, it was already dark by 6 p.m. It seemed the incident with Aming had indeed scared him. Uncle Qian opened the iron door leading from the 2nd to the 3rd floor and left the main door ajar. Perhaps he was worried about seeing something and needing a quick escape. This gave me an opportunity. Once I confirmed he had gone upstairs, I quietly slipped through the iron door and hid around a corner on the third floor. I hugged my bag tightly against my back, pressing against the wall, afraid to move and risk being discovered. Is anyone here? If not, I'm leaving. Uncle Qian's voice came from above, suggesting he was checking from top to bottom. After a while, he called out the same thing again, and this time his voice was closer. He must have descended a floor. I hadn't expected Uncle Qian to check this building so hastily, but it worked to my advantage as it meant I wouldn't be caught. When he reached the third floor, I saw him shine his flashlight around, yet I didn't hear him call out. Maybe he didn't see me. The heavy sound of the iron door closing was quick and decisive, and soon I heard him going downstairs. I let out a long breath, wasting no time, and started searching room by room. A few classrooms on the third and fourth floors were unlocked, but aside from some old, moldy wooden desks and chairs, there was nothing inside. The locked rooms could also be accessed through the windows. Before long, I was covered in dust. By this time, it was completely dark outside. The corridors of this building didn't have motion-activated lights. Aside from the green emergency exit sign, there was no light source to guide me. Considering that one side of the building faced the school's corridor, I didn't dare turn on my phone's flashlight. I could only wait until I got into a classroom or office to use it. After about another hour, aside from a slightly broken mirror that looked familiar on the third floor, I found nothing. Could someone have taken the files already? Eventually, I made a discovery on the fifth floor. Classroom that Ming mentioned, which should have faced the corridor, was actually the office where the old Ba Zhong stored old files. The door was locked, but the window was open. I climbed through the window and found 2 rows of file cabinets and a few half-open abandoned cupboards inside. There were also several old desks and scattered chairs. The desks were covered in glass, with old newspapers from years past pressed underneath, giving off a sense of nostalgia. Seeing some materials laid out on the desk, I began to look through them. Upon closer inspection, I found that these 2 documents detailed the campus renovation of Ba Zhong, as if someone had deliberately placed them there after reviewing them. I turned on my phone's flashlight and covered it with 2 napkins to avoid attracting security with bright light, then cautiously flipped through the files, hoping to find a clue. Finally, I found a section about the 5th floor corridor. Turned out that back in 1998, the entire building had been part of the old Ba Zhong, and the 5th floor had a corridor. Later, due to an incident involving a student, it was forcibly removed. That time, the 1st and 2nd floors hadn't yet been rented out as storefronts. The records clearly documented the transition of the 5th floor corridor from existing to non-existent after 1998. But this didn't make sense. Wang Lijie and the fat guy also remembered the corridor. It shouldn't be. Just as I was pondering, a cabinet behind me suddenly creaked open. Who's there? Tian. Is that you? Is it really you? I had already been scared pale, but hearing Ming's voice relieved me, although my rapid heartbeat still left me breathless. Is that really you, Tian? Yes, it's me. What are you doing here? Ming slowly stepped out from the cabinet. In the darkness, under the faint light of my phone, half of her figure seemed to merge with the shadows behind her. It wasn't until she got closer that I could see her face. She wore a gray spaghetti strap dress and a red jacket, dressed just like when we had met the previous night. Her eyes were slightly puffy, her face shockingly pale, and her makeup was smudged from crying. Purple at the ends of her long hair was indistinguishable in the night, but the fluorescent blue earrings were still striking. She rushed toward me and burst into tears.